So when I saw this article, I knew I had to click on it because this can either go really, really well and it's a pretty good article, or it can just completely go down the drain and explode. And I'm curious to see what the end result's going to be. Elder Scrolls Online versus Final Fantasy XIV. Which is better? This is like so incredibly clickbaity that I'm probably going to do a highlight of this and put it on the channel and just literally copy the title. Because the clickbait is just so good. So incredibly good. I can only see it go well. And let me tell you something before we get started with this. I have played a bit of Elder Scrolls Online. I didn't play it nearly as much as I've played Final Fantasy, which clearly answers the question, which one is better for me? It is 100% going to be Final Fantasy. But I'm very curious to see what the comparison terms are going to be for them to make this an Elder Scrolls Online versus Final Fantasy. Which one is better? By Jamie Pelican over at, I'm not sure if it's Pelican, over at TheGamer. So I'm very curious to see what this is going to be like. It's tough to decide which MMO reigns supreme over the other, Elder Scrolls Online or Final Fantasy XIV. Even though it has been years since both Elder Scrolls Online and Final Fantasy XIV were launched, each game still boasts dedicated groups of players. Both games are still powerhouses within the MMO genre, with each game offering you hours of engaging content to immerse yourself in. However, each game possesses its own strengths and weaknesses which make them better or worse in the eyes of each player. Is it going to be a top 10 list? While determining the best MMO between the two is up to your personal opinion. Okay, so you're actually not going to say which one's the best one. There are certain gameplay aspects each game does better than the other. 10. Elder Scrolls Online does not require a subscription to play. That is literally one of the main reasons why I'm very much considering buying the Elder Scrolls Online. Because there's the discount going on right now. Less than 40 bones. You get all of the expansions, all of that content, and you basically get it forever. It does seem extremely tempting. Subscription-based games may seem like a thing of the past, but with Final Fantasy XIV's monthly subscription service, the system is alive and well. With Elder Scrolls Online, however, there's no mandatory subscription fee to play, which makes it the more appealing option if you've never played an MMO before. Just buy a copy and you're good to explore the world of Tamriel. And while you can buy a Game Pass for Elder Scrolls Online, this fee is not a necessity to play and enjoy the game. 9 out of 10. Final Fantasy XIV offers a compelling story. So right here, they're basically saying Final Fantasy story is better than Elder Scrolls Online. While there's valid criticism that the storyline of Final Fantasy XIV is extremely, almost unbearably long, there's too much story. We're so sorry for having too much content. The themes and character development within the game is far richer than the one within Elder Scrolls Online. And with the Realm Reborn edition, the main questline has been remodified to feel more seamless to players. With Elder Scrolls Online, the story is still one worth playing, but it lacks strong and memorable characters. The lore of the Elder Scrolls franchise is still present, but it is not packaged in a way most players of Elder Scrolls games are used to. Elder Scrolls Online story is more beginner-friendly. Yes, Final Fantasy XIV does have a better story overall, but if you are someone who is new to either franchise and just looking for an MMO to play, Elder Scrolls Online is the one to pick. The story does rely on existing lore, but the manner it's placed in the story makes it easier to understand. I'm not so sure about this point. I'm not sure that I agree with this point. I feel like this almost makes it seem like Final Fantasy's story is impenetrable, which is not the case. It's not the case. If anything, the thing that would be more beginner-friendly is the fact that, from my understanding, in ESO, there's horizontal progression, which means that basically you're not forced to play in a linear fashion. You can go, like for instance, I believe that you can just start a new character and go straight into the latest expansion, if you want to. You can go straight into the latest zone and play a level 1 character in the latest zone because the world scales with you. And I actually think that's a good thing. And that is what I would say is more beginner-friendly, more so than the story. I don't think the story is particularly, I don't think the story is particularly hard to get into in Final Fantasy XIV. If Final Fantasy XIV is your first game of the franchise, things will be more complicated to understand. No. Okay, this is just wrong. Okay, this is just 200% wrong. Does anybody in my chat agree with this? This is just straight up wrong. Like I said, I'm trying to better myself. Let's agree to disagree on this point, okay? Because I haven't played that many Final Fantasy games, okay? Before I played Final Fantasy XIV, I played a bit of Final Fantasy VIII ages ago, and I've played Final Fantasy XV. I think those are all the Final Fantasies I've ever played. Right? Yeah, if I've played another Final Fantasy, I can't really remember it. So it's not complicated to understand. Details of previous games established will be... What? Details of previous games established will be lost? Did they just assume... I didn't play the remaster before I played 14. I played the remaster after 14. The remaster was after I played 14. And it's are they assuming that you need to know Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 in order to understand 14? You don't. You really don't. 14 is its own thing. He's referencing Final Fantasy 12. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I guess the Stormblood raids were weird. Yes. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, is if you would consider it's I keep stretching out my arms because they fit in the camera, but they don't actually fit in the crop that I have. But let's say if the story of Final Fantasy XIV is this, then it's the Stormblood raids, which reference Final Fantasy XII, would be this. Not even this. It would be small. It'd be a millimeter. Come on. So I don't agree with this point at all. Final Fantasy XIV has more beginner-friendly game mechanics. Game mechanics can make or break on deciding to continue playing an MMO, and while the Elder Scrolls Online mechanics aren't terrible, they're not nearly on the level of Final Fantasy XIV. User interface system utilized in the game makes it way easier for players who don't know what's going on. There are more statistics up on screen for the player, which makes the first few hours of the gameplay easier to get a grasp on. This combined with the in-game NPC labeling makes the world easier to explore, allowing you to get more immersed in the story. Yeah, I remember that it was when I played Elder Scrolls Online, it was really confusing. It was very confusing. Elder Scrolls Online offers more impact from player choices. All great RPGs have you see the consequences of your choices in-game, and the same goes for Elder Scrolls Online. Despite the game being inherently multiplayer, the decision for your choices to directly impact your world was made. Being able to deal with the fallout of your own actions places an added weight on... I didn't know that you could do that. That's cool. Again, I didn't play too much of ESO. Being able to deal with the fallout of your own actions places an added weight on each decision you are faced with and adds a degree of uncertainty to every quest. Final Fantasy XIV may win in the overall story, but it has nothing on player choices yet. Literally nothing. I mean, not literally nothing. There's a couple of choices that you can make, but there's very little consequences there from what I can tell. Shinigami Bushi says that's BS. In my opinion, it all leads to the same thing. Really? It's just flavored text choices? So there's no actual big consequences? Fallout 4 choices? I mean, Fallout 4 actually had some choices that you would make. Didn't I nuke the Commonwealth? I forget. I think I did. Yes. No, but yes. Okay. So, my chat doesn't agree with this point. This is weird, because, the points that supposedly Elder Scrolls Online is winning, we don't really agree with. We don't really seem to agree with a lot of them. But again, I want to make sure that Elder Scrolls Online players understand, if you end up coming to this video, I am most likely going to buy the game, and I'm most likely going to check it out further. So keep that in mind. They are more or less big. Some kill off NPCs, some lead to other groups helping you in the final battle of an area. The overall story stays the same. Okay. Final Fantasy XIV is better at cross-platform play. Well, that's not hard, considering that Elder Scrolls Online doesn't do cross-platform play. This is not really a big point, considering that the other game doesn't do it. It's not better, more like it supports cross-platform play. It should say Final Fantasy XIV supports cross-platform play. When it comes to cross-platform play, 14 wins hands down. You can choose to play the game PC, PlayStation. It'll all be the same player base. This makes a larger player base to interact and play with. Elder Scrolls Online is available Xbox, PlayStation. The two are separate from those playing on PC. Moreover, the console player base is more likely smaller since many opt to play MMOs on PC, and the PC edition was launched before the console editions. See? This is potentially one of the reasons why I also didn't have too much fun when I tried ESO, is because I played on PlayStation. And I don't think there's probably going to be that many people playing ESO on PlayStation. Probably more people playing on an Xbox. There's probably going to be there has to be some kind of tie-in with the Game Pass at this point, since they acquired Bethesda, right? So that should be a thing, I think. And yeah, I think ESO is probably more of a PC type scenario. Elder Scrolls Online is better for filthy casual play. I'm sorry. Every time I read the word casual, I always imagine the word filthy coming ahead of it. Elder Scrolls Online is better for filthy casuals. For those interested in only casually playing an MMO, Elder Scrolls Online is the better way to go for several reasons. I mean, the main reason why this is it's like, I don't think the word better is 100% correct. I think Elder Scrolls Online is a better investment for casual players in terms of monetary. Because I think 14 is great for casual players. Because I play 14 very casually. If you look at the way I play 14, do I sometimes play long hours? Sure. But am I doing like the savage content, the extreme content? I'm really not. So technically speaking, I'm playing extremely casually and I'm having a really good time. But I can see this point because it doesn't have a sub fee, so therefore it is much more friendly for a casual player, because it's not like you pay your sub fee and you're like, oh, I should play the game. I should go play the game because I already paid for it, right? You don't have that pressure. It's more like, oh, I feel like logging into ESO, and then you log into ESO. Boom. ESO is better for casuals. Also, Final Fantasy XIV has easier game mechanics. Let's read the point. For those interested in only casually playing an MMO, Elder Scrolls Online is the way to go for several reasons. The storyline does not require hours of devotion and can be picked right up after a month-long hiatus. Yep. On the other hand, if you stop playing 14 for a month, chances are you would be completely and totally lost. I think you'd be just as lost in Elder Scrolls Online, right? If they're talking like mechanically. So if you're looking to play an MMO because it sounds fun and you're not willing to spend the next 6 months of your life playing that game, Elder Scrolls Online is the perfect game. Final Fantasy XIV has better social features. You might have a group of friends in mind you want to play an MMO with you, or not afraid to talk to strangers on the internet. Either way, Final Fantasy XIV offers better features for being social with friends. I'm actually going to have to go ahead and disagree. I'm going to go ahead and disagree with this. I mean, maybe it has better social features, but in terms of like, if you're playing with a group of friends in mind, I don't necessarily think that 14 is the better game. I don't know if maybe it's better than ESO, because again, I didn't play that much ESO, right? But this is one of the criticisms that I actually have of Final Fantasy XIV, is the fact that, if I have a friend of mine that starts playing, I can't necessarily just go and do the MSQ with him. I can't, because most of the MSQ is like scenarios that you need to do solo. I think that there's a lot of really cool social content in 14, but that is player-driven social content. So like FCs hanging out in FC houses, and there's also the role-playing components and all of that. And I know that that is huge in the Final Fantasy XIV community, right? the social aspect of it, yeah, for sure. But it's mostly player driven. It's not necessarily something that is built into the game. Either way, Final Fantasy XIV offers better features for being social with friends. Common features like text chat are easy to use and good for communicating with your group. You're trying to tell me that you can't use text chat in ESO? Not only does the game allow more players to cross-platform, but the overall community base is also fairly solid for an MMO. Fan base is welcoming to new players. Okay, maybe ESO is not as welcoming, because 14 is extremely welcoming. They're good at self-monitoring themselves and what they say. Overall, it is slightly better than the other gaming communities. Hey. See, I knew it. Like, I knew it, dude. I knew that there was going to be one point in this article where everything was going to go south. I knew it. I knew it, dude. Like, here it is. Right there. Elder Scrolls Online has a better combat system. Mr. Soul Creek says ESO is just scuffed Skyrim, and Skyrim combat already sucks. See, that's the thing. My experience that I have in Skyrim and with Skyrim is that I always like to say I think Skyrim could be a fantastic game if it only had an actual combat system, melee. I should say melee combat system, because I guess, you know, you can do magic, you can shoot arrows, but you know, you don't really have a melee combat system. And I should clarify, given that, you know, we're actually talking about Elder Scrolls and whatnot, but you know, the melee combat of Skyrim, at least when I played it back in the day, was basically like, you left click and your character does this. You hold left click, your character does this. And then you right click and your character does this, and he blocks. And that's the combat system for Skyrim. So it's almost like it's not there. ESO combat is a poor man's action combat. Wow. Kurenai Senshi says, ESO combat system is what made me quit the game. Wow. So this is not even me, because like when I played it, my problem was the animation. The animations of the game was what completely turned me off. So combat animations and all that, I didn't like it. And that's kind of like why I ended hopping off of it. I've heard that it's better now. I'm curious to see it, but you know, let's see what they have to say about this. The combat system for Elder Scrolls Online was designed for you to feel completely immersed in the heat of battle. The game requires players to aim and react to the enemy's moves as if they were in person, forcing them to pay attention to every blow dealt. Go ahead and press X to doubt on that one, if you don't mind. Final Fantasy XIV's combat system automatically locks onto enemies for the player, making the combat experience less engaging. The system also feels repetitive after a while, making battles less and less exciting as you continue on the main quest. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. It is actually the exact opposite. The more you level up, the more complex the combat becomes, the more engaging it becomes, the more interesting it becomes. That's the way that I see it. The combat automatically locks onto enemies. That's not exactly how it works. It's tab targeting. It's a tab targeting MMO, whereas Elder Scrolls is an action MMO. These are two very different combat systems. Personally, I couldn't get, when I first played ESO, I couldn't get into the combat system, whereas getting into the combat system of 14 was very easy. Very easy getting into it. Very hard to master it, though. Very easy to get into, very hard to master. Which in my book is a good thing. I think that there's a lot of depth to the combat system of 14. There's, depending on the class that you play and all that, like your classes you have to spend a lot of time studying how to actually play 14. I don't know if I don't think you can just say Elder Scrolls Online is a better combat system just because it's action combat. If you're someone that prefers action combat, then yeah, you want to play ESO. If you're someone that prefers tab targeting, you definitely want to play 14. So, to be fair, you went in from a WoW background, but with preference for action games. I have a WoW, Mr. Soul Creek, I have a WoW background, but what are my favorite games to play? Dark Souls, Monster Hunter, 2 action games. So it's like, yes, I have a World of Warcraft background, but I prefer the combat of action games. So, you know. Final Fantasy XIV lets players switch classes. I've been told that ESO is kind of like classless, like your class determines your starter stuff. Class system in Final Fantasy XIV is solely based on which weapon you currently have equipped. You can switch weapons and therefore classes instantly. Not instantly, so long as you're not in the middle of like a dungeon or, you're not in the middle of combat. Then yeah, you can switch weapons and you can swap classes. But you can't this almost makes it sound like, oh, you're in the middle of a dungeon and like, oh, I'm going to swap from being a tank to being a DPSer. It's not how it works. I'm going to get a feel for all the different builds and classes you have available. Builds is a strong word when it comes to 14. As far as I'm aware, there's no such thing anymore. It's like your build is your job. It's like, are you a paladin? Good, you're a paladin. Are you a gunbreaker? Good, you're a gunbreaker. No such thing as different builds anymore. It's just jobs. This also makes the game more flexible in determining the type of character you best play. Elder Scrolls Online class system is much more restrictive and locks you in on what you initially picked in the beginning. If you don't like your class, you must create a new character to change it. To be honest, WoW is the best tab targeting and BDO is the best action combat, probably. But BDO has a lot of other baggage that it brings with it. So they don't actually tell you which one is better. So they make a question at the start of this article, they clickbait you, and then they don't give you an answer. Why would you do this? Why would you do this? My existing bias would obviously say that Final Fantasy XIV is the better one for the type of MMO that I personally like to play nowadays. Final Fantasy XIV is definitely the better one for me, and Endwalker is the one that I'm more interested in playing. That's not to say that I believe that Final Fantasy XIV is better end of. That is to say that I believe that these two games serve different audiences. But like I said, I do intend on playing more Elder Scrolls Online, so maybe I will, maybe I'll change my mind, but I think it'll be very, 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 very hard after the stuff that I've been through in Final Fantasy XIV. I think very few games will ever reach the level of Final Fantasy XIV for me at this point. But yeah, it was interesting to see this person's opinions, but I think you need to do a little bit more research on some of the topics that you posted here, Jamie. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that one.